Dear poets, ladies and gentlemen, my sister in a whole darn lot, Nickole Brown.
All my dreams have just been achieved. I love you, Laure-Anne Bosselaar. I love you. So, 15 years. 15 years this festival has been happening. Miles, Mimi, I love you too. I cannot believe. I was in Sharon Olds' workshop in one of the first of those festivals, shy and wobbly, and writing the first few poems of what eventually became my second book. And my years coming here again and again, I just keep showing up like a bad penny. It's changed me. It's formed me. My education, my poetry education, I received here. And I've been to some good programs, and I have worked under some amazing people, but I've learned more here than I ever have. I can't tell you how much I appreciate what you guys do. And Susan and Jennifer and Miss Kelsey and the workshop that I've had the pleasure of working with this week, it's just been absolutely amazing. So, thank you. So, I've always written about family. I come from Kentucky, and I've always written from my life. And recently, I would say about 3 years ago, it just wasn't enough. I've been looking out into the world. I've been paying attention to what's happening to our planet. And the word Anthropocene comes to mind. I'm sure you guys have heard that before. That's the geological era that we're in which everything on this planet is influenced by human beings. But the word I actually prefer has been coined by a naturalist named E.O. Wilson. And E.O. Wilson is famous for studying ants. And he actually calls this era the Aracelis. And it essentially translates as the age of loneliness. And I can't get over that, and I can't stop thinking about the living things on this planet that aren't humans that are dying out at an unprecedented rate. And nothing else matters to me in terms of my writing. I just keep coming back to it again and again and again. And so I'm writing about animals. I used to call it a bestiary of sorts, and I suppose that's still what it is, and I suppose it's still a really good excuse to watch all of those ridiculous animal videos on YouTube. It's just my crack. It's so much fun. But I've also been studying a lot. I've been reading every book I can get my hands on. I've been volunteering at animal sanctuaries and trying to learn the language that animals speak and trying to listen to what they might have to teach me. So I'd like to start with a prayer, a kind of invocation. And Laure-Anne quoted a bit from it. It's called A Prayer to Talk to Animals. Lord, I ain't the beast master. Lord, I ain't asking to be the beast master, Jim ripped in a jungle loincloth, or a Dr. Doolittle, or even the expensive vet down the street, that stethoscoped redhead, her diamond ring big as a Cracker Jack toy. All I want is for you to help me flip off this light box and its scroll of dread, to rip a tiny tear between this world and that, a slit in the veil, Lord, one of those old-fashioned peeping keyholes through which I can press my dumb lips and speak. If you will, Lord, make me the teeth hot in the mouth of a raccoon scraping the junk I scraped from last night's plates. Make me the blue eye of that young crow cocked to me, too selfish to even look up from the flash of my damn phone. Oh, forgive me, Lord, how human I've become. Busy clicking what I like, busy pushing my cuticles back and back to expose all 10 pale, useless moons. Would you let me tell your creatures how sorry I am? Let them know exactly what we've done. Am I not an animal too? If so, Lord, make me one again. Give me back my dirty claws and blood-warm horns. Braid back those long frayed strands of every nerve tingling with all I thought I had to do today. Fork my tongue, Lord. There is a sorrow on the air I taste but cannot name. I want to open my mouth and know the exact flavor of what's to come. I want to open my mouth and sound a language that calls all language home. You know, it's really hard to read from these new poems because when I was reading from Fanny Says and cussing like a sailor, y'all were laughing. This next poem is kind of interesting for me. And then when I first started this project, a good friend of mine looked at me and she said, "Oh, this is great. What a feminist project." And I said, no, that's my first book. And definitely my second book. It is not this book. And she said, "Yeah, okay, you just wait on that." And then I went back to circa 1992. And I started to think about who I was right out of graduation. And this poem is called Wild Thing. What I knew then was plastic packages of ramen, instant, 4 for $1. Because with 4 eggs to match, I'd have myself 4 dinners, provided I could keep the gas on for the month and get that old stove lit with a match. I also knew what went at the store for $1. Pinto beans and sliced white, popcorn, carrots, peas, even juice, long as it was orange, concentrated and frozen in a can. But what I didn't yet know was how that word, buck, got started. Back with my daddy's daddy and on back down the line. Back when for their roomy knees men used panther oil, brought all the way up from Florida when panthers still lived down there. Back when men without a dime to their name could pay land taxes and skins and piled as many kills they could on a wagon headed downtown to sell deer for just that, for $1, $1 a pop. No, what I knew then were bucks in my tip jar. How never to start the night empty, but to always put in a few of my own. Otherwise, not a soul would think me worth $1 and would trash the whole shift with the rattle of pocket change. And though I couldn't have said when deer season hit, no one had to tell me about the weather it brought. How cardboard crammed between wind-rattled panes helped, but barely enough. How under every cover I owned, I'd sleep until the floor stung my feet awake with cold. Once I got up and turned over my car, I might just make it to work on time, but not until I got stuck at a red light with the man who split his 2 fingers apart to make a V for the snake flick of his fat tongue, which meant something about a good time before he gunned his truck and gave me the full view of what his flatbed towed. A white-tail doe, one eye open but somehow more milk or smoke or dirty dishwater than I. Her tongue off its hinge, flapping obscene with every bump down that road. on my popping speakers, a new version of that same old song. Now you don't need that money when you look like that, do you, honey? And it was then I knew the bullshit made up for the endless litany to hit these woods. All those floods that scrubbed the babes from their burrows, lifting their pink writhing to a flotsam of rot. Or else a rage of flames to crowd those same holes with natural-born enemies, snakes huddled alongside a scorched blister of mice and turtles nearly cooked in their shells. And everybody saying wild things could care for themselves and always knew what to do, how to seek higher ground and survive. But really, believing that made me just another fool in this world, mistaking the happiness of looking at a pretty wild thing with the happiness that thing feels. Put another way, I was once young and terribly pretty and gripped the wheel white, felt the rip in the vinyl seat rub the part of my leg raw where my skirt didn't cover. I shut off my radio. In the silence was the talk of men I had heard all my life. All the old jokes. That buck not dead, but put down for his dirt nap and itchin' for a mount. That doe not female, but a slick head, hot and ready for the rut. All those not shot, but taken in peak season in sweet, sweet November. Put another way, I was almost on empty, and no one believed it or cared to see. I was just another animal, and like all animals desired, we would suffer. Thank you. So one of the things I did is when I started this research, I ordered a lot of books. I ordered about 75 the first order came in, mostly because there's this press called Reaction Books, and they have a series called Animal. And they've got a slender little volume on every creature you can imagine. And it's not just the biology, but it's also the history of human beings with different creatures, the ones we hate, the ones we love, the ones we despise, the ones we worship, and on from the cockroach to the owl to the giraffe. And I just love these little books. And one of my favorites that I actually avoided reading because I thought it would be boring was about the snail. And man, snails are really cool. I'm letting you know now. Reaction Books, snail. Look it up. Just trust me. It's like porn. It's amazing. So I couldn't help but resist to write a self-portrait. So this is self-portrait as land snail. Don't get me wrong. I'm a modest girl, couldn't even strip off at one of those nudie hot springs out west, the whole place a flotsam of much-nursed areolas and buoyant scrotums, while I sat prim as Gidget, legs crossed awkwardly and awkwardly smiling on the shore. It's just that the snail is on to something. Neither boy nor girl, but both. The critter is nearly mythic, a true hermaphrodite that all alone will go to its own kind of cryobank and baste itself, make a new batch of not-so-bouncies and thin, flea-sized shells. But no, that's not me. That seems lonely. Better with another other, with another intersex other, it will take aim, flex back its bow, shoot a dart, then wait to be impaled in return. I couldn't make this shit up if I tried. This is no metaphor, but scientific fact. A tellum amoris, literally a weapon of love. A James Bond-worthy arrow equipped with 4 blades spiked with all the dirty talk a snail could want. Cupid's got nothing on this mollusk Congress, and because you know how snails go, the foreplay is slow. Slow, slow. My kind of sex. Going on until the hussy who first received that dart has enough, then rises to fire back. Now, knowing this, I can't say I didn't come out all those years ago, whatever that means. No, when I finally made a home for my body in the bed of another woman, I simply became a land snail. Tired of being a leaking receptacle for a man's desire, I needed to feel an equal's push against my own, a willingness to be wounded and to wound, receiving and giving at the same time. Plainly said, I needed the kind of love that finally let me take my time. I needed to fire an arrow of my damn own. So one of the things that Jessica and I love to do is to sort of study the same things and argue about it. And she's been reading the Talmud. She's been reading the Old Testament. And she said, have you read about Samson? I'm like, the one with the hair? And she's like, no, but have you read it? And, I don't know if you guys remember that story, but I got all fired up. So I wrote him a letter. This is in 4 parts. And it's called To Those Who Were Our First Gods, an Offering. Number 1. Samson, I admit it, I flirted with you in Sunday school, crayon tan your He-Man pecs, picked the boxes best to dye bright your Pantene perfect waves. But even then, I didn't touch those kamikaze columns, left blank those 2 stone pillars snapped with your sledgehammer fists to crush a whole damn crowd. Yes, even then, I was a real red-letter girl, timid in the back pew, hiding behind the blue cloak of the only one I ever felt safe enough to pray to. Hail Mary, keep me from judges in every other book in the OT, gut piled and slick as a slaughterhouse floor. Dear Mary, Mother of, save me from those men like him who slit the throats of lambs, then struck a pyre to burn the poor beasts, calling what they've done a sacrifice. 2. Even now, I'm trying to understand those jacked up swaths of the Bible everyone shoves under the rug. Like your barbarian move to snag 300 fox and bind them in terrified pairs. And if that wasn't enough, you roped a lit torch between their tails, Samson, then freed them, screaming, to burn grain fields and olive groves, to burn alive. Samson, did I ever tell you after hearing that story of yours, my cousin bolted out of church to try to shove firecrackers up the poodle's ass? When I cried, my aunt called the dog from the yard, said, don't mind them boys, they're just proven themselves. The only boy I knew back then with nothing to prove lived down the street, and in the sleeve of his jean jacket he kept a foundling squirrel, nursed it pan-warm milk with a syringe. That little boy's name was Pete, but everyone called him Faggot. 3. So tell me, Samson, that donkey's jaw, did you ever think it wrong to wield a thing accustomed to the piece of fresh hay and swing it like a thug does a baseball bat? And is it really a miracle to pry open the proud mouth of a lion and rip apart his face? And why, a year later, did you return to the scene just to toy with the trophy of his corpse? Either way, you pillaged the hive that made sanctuary in what was left of his chest. I see you there, Samson, squatting inside the broken cage of ribs, reaching to where the great cat's heart once was to snatch another stinging comb, the crust of dead bees and their honey in your beard. Because you didn't just spring hot from the mouth of wrath to slay the enemy of your tribe, did you? No, Samson, you came to kill those beasts who were our first gods. Those forms we used to paint on cave walls, those animals who were not made as sacrifice for your altars, but were the temples themselves. 4. Come here, big man. It is time you wake. It is time you find a different answer, time to solve your own riddle once again. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Because the answer is no longer fear curdled into rage, a murdered lion with a swarm sugaring his remains. Answer me, because I see you, you action figure lackey, you lonely tender heart duped by your girlfriend's shears. I wait next to your sleeping head to gather what she cuts from you, and outside I set it free. Can you say it? Do you see? Your hair spun with spider silk and lichened to make a hummingbird's thumbnail home. Your hair matted into the tatters of chewed through clothes to cradle a litter naked and pink. Your hair tucked into musky dens, a spun gold currency flown among crows. Your hair, the soft bed where strays bleed and possums hiss. Your hair lining every hollow, warming a throne of owls. You see, Samson, a whole kingdom steals away your locks by tooth and talon and claw. Your strength taken from you, but given back to whom it rightfully belongs. Thank you. And I'm going to end with one long poem. Sorry about that, but it's just one. And what you need to know about this is that when I got further enough into this research, I realized that reading about animals was not enough, and I needed to be among them. And at the time, I just moved to Asheville, and it's a wonderful little place up in the mountains, and there are so many people who care about non-human beings up there. And so I started volunteering at a horse sanctuary and working at a nature center, and there's a wildlife rehab place that I'm training for. And Another place where I've started working is this beautiful little place called Animal Haven. It's a farm sanctuary, and basically they just take in any unwanted, abused, neglected domestic. It basically means I just scoop a lot of poo, but that's okay. I've got a poem in here about poo, but I won't read it to you. And what I thought is that I was going there to help the animals, right? That I was, doing something good. What I didn't realize is how much they would heal me. And in particular, after the election, walking in there the day after the election and being greeted by all of these goats and sheep and chickens and dogs and cats and geese and they were just hungry and kind of happy to see me, right? And at the same time that I was working out there, I was reading a book, and it's by a woman named Rebecca Solnit, and it's called Hope in the Dark. And she actually wrote it during the Bush administration, but it was reissued during this time. And she's an historian. She's really brilliant, but she looks at what activists have done throughout history to try to help the world, right? And how oftentimes those people doing the most work won't see any results. A lot of times they'll die without ever thinking their life's work meant anything. But she takes the long view, and she says, look, all those years later, what they did, it made a difference. And she makes a case in her book for hope. And I love this so much, and I want to give this to anybody I see. She thinks of hope as an action and not a feeling. Love can be thought of as this way, right? Anybody married long enough knows that sometimes it's just an action, right? But it's all right because you're doing the right thing. Or if you have courage, it's not because you feel courage, it's because you feel afraid, right? So hope is something you do when you feel despair. And this is a poem called Against Despair, The Kid Goat. And I've dedicated it for Trina and Barb. They're the two women that run Animal Haven. Reader, meet the two women who sunk everything they had into taking in broken animals. The gimpy and oozing critters, the ugly, lopsided, tailless pets, urine-soaked and drooling, zested with fleas, the matted and discarded scrap heaps left growling and bucking, hissing on everything, the good riddance left roped to a chain-link fence. No, I take that back. Instead, I want you to be those two. I want you crazy enough to try to fix those beasts, to feed and brush and bathe and dip and sweet milk them whole. I want you to try, to always try, despite the odds, just as you coax the docile, fat, blind pig up on legs that eventually broke from his own inbred weight, just as you spritz the mites off a mangy hen that would be limp in the claws of a hawk later that same day. On the hill, a stubborn but sometimes gentle sheep grows cold under a blue tarp. And in your truck is a towel across the back seat for your favorite but neurotic as hell dog. How you rushed her to the vet only to see her put down. No, let me make this real. Reader, I want you tired. Every joint in your body stiff and worn. I want you to finally strip off your filthy clothes. Then I want you jolted from sleep by a cry that in your dreams sounds like an infant wailing, and now awake sounds just the damn same. Go find that kid bleeding in the grainy dark. He's no bigger than a lap dog, and on his fist-sized head are the buds of his horns, tiny, like 2 popcorn pieces of warm bone, 2 bright spots, the only thing you can see. Flip on the switch. Now you know. With bare hands, I want you to clear the froth from his lolling tongue. I want you to grab a rag, a sponge, the corner of your shirt, anything you can find to sop up the liquid, so much of it you can't tell what's what, be it mucus or bile or vomit or blood, as if every water has been brought up for this giving in, as if his body is already a river and rushing away. Now use your arms. It takes strength to steady the convulsing of a thing this young. And then, once his gaze rolls back to white, you know what to do. You know your job. Push together the furred slits of his lids. Close the extinguished horizons of his eyes. Don't play stupid. You knew this was coming. You've seen it enough times. You're not dumb, just desperate to try to save this little meat goat the farmer dumped at your door, too septic and riddled with worms to even be killed to eat. Now, get on your knees. Mop it up. As you wring out the rags, don't push away what you know of the sun. Let yourself admit the light. How it made his ears pink and transparent, revealed the secret veins of leaves. How you adored it when they swiveled to your voice and he looked up to give you the small meditations of fresh milk and hay in his mouth. Go on. Get sentimental if you have to. Have a good cry. No one is here. And besides, who would care? Because you try, don't you? You always try, but always that impossible riddle. Always the word riddled with the word worms, as if each whip-like body was curled into a question, a wriggling puzzle, a mob infestation of questions, parasites that love a home so hard they turned that kid goat anemic, fevering, stuttering with a murmuring heart, shitting out a writhing pile of larvae and eggs. Little sips, little hooks, little burrows. This was how, little by little, that little goat finally collapsed, arched his throat back as if to be slit, jerked his legs up into the nothing like the fetus he was just 2 months before. But here is the point. Do not ever let yourself think it didn't matter. It mattered then as it matters now. Because until this morning rose dull on the horizon with this useless, good-for-nothing goat now dead on your floor, regardless, in spite of, no matter, you fed a beast worthless, a real lost cause, not unlike this whole stubborn, beautiful, fucked up planet about to seize and drown in its own melt. There really wasn't a thing you could do but admit it. If you knew, if you really could say he would not have died last night but would certainly die tomorrow, you'd force yourself out of bed and do what it is you do. You'd count his pills, warm his formula over the stove, break out his soiled pen, and with arms wide you'd bring him a fresh bale of hay. Yes, that's right. Now say his silly goat name, because, yes, every living thing deserves a name. And you called him Peanut. A playful way to say he was a flake of the size he should have been. So sick he did not jump or play as he should, but leaned his tiny face exhausted into your leg. Now bend to stroke his scrawny goat neck. Say, good boy, Peanut. We got you now. Now, there. Everything's gonna be just fine. You know it's a lie, but no matter. Hope, you know by now, is not a thing you feel, but something you do. And this is your job. It's what you do. It's what needs to be done. Thank you.